All
Uh,
right.
but you'll have to remember, you'll have to do the preamble because I don't remember what we're supposed to say.
I would just say welcome to the February 16th, 2023 Helm developer call, just so we have the date recorded at the start there.
There's
And then with that,
CNCF guidelines, be nice to each other.
yep, be nice to each other. Remember, this is a recorded call, and everything's under the CNCF guidelines.
All right.
Joe, it's all yours.
All right. So there are no announcements. So we'll go straight to the discussions. I brought the first item up is, and as I'm actually really glad you're here, Matt, because I think this needs a core maintainer to look at. Somebody's reported a go routine leak in report to run. And I don't know enough. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about that part of the code, so I don't know what to look for. But if somebody could look at that, that'd probably be a good thing.
Yeah, I've just opened it. I can go take a look at it.
And with that, unless somebody else has anything to say about that, we'll go on to Philip.
All right, so I share my screen. Oh, where is this in Zoom? Here. Not using Zoom too often, to admit. All right, can you see the notes?
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, last week quickly talked about the CVE, right, and asked me to demo this, and I wasn't prepared for this, so this week I'm prepared. Yeah, so I can just show you how this works very briefly. So just connect to my virtual server, and I have something running there already in a TMOX session. And now if we go say hello and community call 16 web this, and yeah, then this data you passed in here is sent over to my evil server. Yeah, you can see it's a Helm template call, right? Which is, I guess, generally seen as something that you can run without any fear that anything could happen, even on an untrusted chart. So that's why I reported this as a vulnerability. And yeah, then just if you pass any value there, this can get leaked. That's, I guess, all I have to show.
Yeah.
How do you specify the DNS server that you're going to contact?
This works. You need a domain under your control. And then you can do this in the domain.
Oh, I got you. You would look up a subdomain. Gotcha.
Yeah. So kind of works.
How do you prevent this DNS leakage? If like for installation or upgrade?
Yeah, so for installation and upgrade, it's still it's also possible to do. But there, like installing an untrusted chart, I guess everybody should be aware that this is a bad idea, right? But it can still happen there, and there it is even worse because it can use lookup to pull some data out of your cluster and then even like leak this. But yeah, if you install an untrusted chart into your cluster, there are so many ways this can go wrong, right? You can just start a Bitcoin miner as a daemon set on all your nodes and whatever, right? So I mean, it's still, if you maybe have made some precautions and added a I don't know, service account for the Helm installation, so that it, I don't know, and only can create secrets and config maps, right? Then you might say, okay, it's safe to install, but what harm should this config map create? But in that sense, yeah. But I guess it's the template case is then the more, let's say, realistic attack vector here. There are also other ways this could be abused. But I guess the Helm template case is there where people would think, yeah, this is safe. I can just run this and I can even pass it my real password without any trouble.
Yeah, and that's why we, when we handled it, we also handled it on install and upgrade as well. So you have to opt into DNS now in order for those lookups.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this shouldn't be too big of a problem because I don't really understand even the use case for this host name lookup. I guess the caching DNS names indefinitely is a bad idea. Don't know, Matt, if you have some context why someone would want to use this in their chart. But
I don't remember the original context to it. I was not involved in that.
So I don't think this is a widespreadly used function, so it shouldn't really hurt anyone that have to explicitly opt in for this behavior.
It's maybe a very large topic, but do you think Helm should, I don't know, it's not quite the domain of linting, but say if you are using a chart and it uses lookup or get host by name, or I think these are the two main functions. Maybe generating random values could come in this category as well, but things which aren't maybe best practices that could tell the user that this chart is, what you're doing is not best practice. Maybe this is the domain of linting.
And some of this is the domain of linting, and some of it is people do have use cases for some of this. And so, maybe it's 99% of people don't. There's still maybe a whole bunch of people in that 1% or 0.5% who have it as a legitimate reason to use it. And to say it's not a best practice when they don't have another way around it is, that's where things can become problematic. It could be useful to have some kind of linting to say this is, or a reporting that says this is what the chart is doing, because I think that would help people analyze things that they just grab off the internet and say, hey, so I got this thing, what is it doing? But I don't know that we would put into Helm itself. I would definitely suggest somebody start that off as a plugin, and then that's one of those things I can, analyze a chart.
Yeah, plugins a nice idea here. Let me think about this.
Yeah, warning, this chart connects outside the cluster.
Is there not already linting tools for Helm? I thought I could have swore when I use VS Code, sometimes it highlights things and says you shouldn't do them that way, but
there's lots of linting tools out there. So VS Code, a lot of times if you're working in templates, because the plugin for VS Code that does Kubernetes also does Helm, it knows what Kubernetes YAML structure should look like. And so a lot of times it's recommending things like that, but it can be smart in some of those recommendations. But as far as this template function, shouldn't be used and those kinds of things, those are kind of recommendations and understanding depending on your situation. In this case, yeah, I would look, and there are linting tools out there. I just don't know any of them that do this.
Okay. With nothing else, have nothing else to add there. Oh, go ahead.
So I guess it would be actually nice to say that Helm templating should be deterministic, right? That would be a nice feature to have. You can be sure if same same chart, same values, you will are guaranteed to get the same output, would definitely have some merit. But yeah.
You run into trouble with random generation, and
Yeah.
there's a number of other cases where it doesn't work. If you're dealing with dates and times, if you're dealing with random generation, then those kinds of cases you just can't. And there are
So
legitimate reasons for that. Yeah.
I don't know if you know about YTT from the Carvel tool chain, which is now also in a CNCF project, as far as I know, right? And there they explicitly decided against any non-determinism. And they say, if you want randomness, just pass it in as an input. So that, you know, at least, so you separate those two concerns, templating from, like, I don't know, if you need data from your cluster, fetch it first, feed it in as an input. So you have a clear view of what is going on. It's less convenient. So yeah, it's kind of a trade-off, right?
It definitely is a trade-off. And the way we look at things a lot of times and have is, one, well, we already have it. So we live in the world where we already have these things. And two, actually carrying people along without breaking them has been a major benefit to Helm being useful to people. If we say all of a sudden we're going to reject all these charts, you just can't use them anymore, you now break a whole lot of users. And people don't want their experience to be broken, right? They'll get mad at the project, they'll get angry at the project. So to change from it, say even in a Helm version 4, we now start saying all these charts, they're broken, they're not going to work with us anymore. You know, imagine how unhappy so many Helm users are then going to be, and that's going to create a fairly bad experience. So I'm not sure how to move to a different way of being without upsetting, you know, that world of Helm users.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is suggesting blocking or denying these things, but I still think it's a different thing to suggest a best practice, saying what you're doing probably isn't the best. And if people don't know it's not the best, then they may, oh, maybe I should do it differently. I stuck a similar to YTT. There's a QLang as a templating engine, which was also made the choice to be deterministic as another example. Anyway, as I maybe preluded, this is probably a big discussion. So
we got time. There's nothing to prevent an external linter too. Like, I mean, Go doesn't lint half the things that Golang CI lint does. So there's always room for adding linters.
And I encourage people to go off and write linters and discuss the best practices and do that. I encourage that.
Awesome. Thanks for the demo, Philip.
Too bad I missed it.
It's on
It's recorded.
Well, one thing we were talking about with this particular CVE is, does anyone actually run Go template on charts they don't trust? Like, I totally surprises me that it does, but it seems like it's got to be pretty rare, because it seems like the time period between running Go template and running Helm install is normally pretty short.
It's actually really, really common because Argo CD installs by template.
Yes, but then it installs it immediately, right? So,
but it
does.
But
I think I hear what you're saying, Ian, that like, and that's a good point, Joe, but what I'm hearing is that like, if you're running Argo CD in order to install and it uses Helm template, then you're assuming that you're in the install process. Whereas I think what I'm hearing you say is, you know, the template process one, it would be, you know, sort of the principle of least surprise that it wouldn't do anything beyond just template.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm just thinking, like, as far as mitigation is, like, I wonder how many people like they already trust the chart, and like I could see a case where it's like somebody has a CI/CD for their dev environment that like automatically pulls charts and runs Helm template, and then in the review process they find, oh, it was compromised, and then it's too late, the secrets are lost. So it is definitely a real possible vector, but it
Well-
would, I think there's probably a pretty short window there, luckily.
I mean, a lot of people just grab random charts off the internet and run them. And that ultimately becomes it, whether they're running an install or they're running a template and doing it. And something like this, you can hide entirely from the output. So maybe they think, hey, look, it generated just fine, and I used Helm template on it. Great, now I apply it. I don't see anything in the YAML that it produced that's a problem. And little do they know it was leaking information.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I can tell you as a practitioner who's been like leading teams of people using this for years, and I'm not doing that right now, but who has? Yeah, Joe is absolutely right. Like whether not even just with that tool, but even when you're, and so is Matt obviously, but like even when you're, I think to your point, Ian, even when someone thinks they're only doing a templating action, I know that that's something that is done regularly. And one use case is where people want to do some sort of an internal diff. You know, and I don't mean using Helm diff, you know, because that's really more about releases, diffing release information, and diffing what you're about to release versus those releases, or between the two release versions of a release. Sorry, yeah, but I know that for comparing charts and doing all sorts of things and developing charts, people often do a template diff because that's the way that you can see that without a cluster. And that's I don't know how common that is anymore, but I know it's been very common, and I wouldn't be surprised if it still is.
Yeah, which is the situation where you've trusted a chart and they were compromised, and it would be too late by the time you noticed. If with the
right, and not even
yeah.
that a user has trusted it enough to believe, oh, I trusted this enough to install. Just I simply trusted enough to run. Like so, for example, if they download the Helm binary and they do Helm -- help, they assume that that's not going to like do rm-rf star, you know, /star, right? Like they assume that that's trustworthy without having to inspect the entire code base. I think, you know, I think part of the point is that if a user runs Helm template locally, they should be able to have a lower level of trust and not assume that anything horrible is happening. It's like, I'm just templating this. What could possibly happen? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to look for security problems. I'm going to run a template.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how you would run across this. Although I would think like in the by hand situation for that, I normally wouldn't feed it a real password, right? Like, but if it's automated, then maybe I have like a dev environment that just, you know, as soon as it sees a new version. So that to me seems to be like the major thing that's being solved here is like a supply chain attack that could be possible.
Yeah, in lower environments.
You have just a PR validation, right? That someone arbitrarily could open a PR, and on PRs you do Helm template, and on the main branch you then run Helm install, and then because okay, it's safe. You review the PR, you won't merge it if someone adds something that leaks your secrets, but with the PR they can add it. Something like that. So it's not, I think it's, you see it on the severity level that the CVE was assigned to, right? It's not the remote code execution or something, but it's also not completely made up, I guess, that there could be ways of exploiting this. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it ended up being low when you run it through, and we've had something just like this before, years ago. When you run it through a scoring calculator, it ends up being low. But it exists.
Running up against
and it's
time.
not something we've seen in a while. Yeah, all right.
Running up against time. Can I get a volunteer for moderator notes? I will continue doing triage, and I assume you as well, George.
Yep.
I'm going to miss next week's call, so you can't put me down.
I am too.
PR reviews?
I'm gonna miss it too. I'll be in Miami. I'm trying to run something in since I'm between jobs right now. I can do some PR reviews again for sure.
You can sit me down for PR review, and I promise I'll actually review some this week. I've been struggling the last couple of weeks.
Start with my PRs.
Okay. Alrighty. Be a plug.
Awesome.
Quick question for Ina. Are you going to be around for a little bit to ask a question about some of the Azure credential stuff? Or when would be a good time?
I can talk afterwards if you want to grab some time. We can talk about the credential stuff.
Oh, ping.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. See you over next week.
All right. Thank you. Have a good week. Bye.
Bye bye.